Hi, I'm Terry Fox from Philadelphia Dance Projects, and we are here at PhillyCAM with two artists from San Francisco, the Naka Dance Theater, Jose Navarrete and Debbie Kachiyama. And they are here as Philadelphia Dance Projects as part of our annual Scuba performances. Scuba is a national network, touring network for dance. And we say it's scuba because we're diving into touring. And we partner with San Francisco, the ODC Theater there, Velocity Dance Center in Seattle, and Minneapolis, we have an independent curator, and then here in Philly with Philadelphia Dance Projects. And Jose and Debbie were invited in 2012 to go to Japan to work on the tsunami cleanup. And while they were there, they also went to Fukushima, and they joined in with some of the artists there who are taking an active role in bringing to the fore what's going on with that debacle. So they, as part of their scuba presentation, they're doing a piece called Bailout, which has to do with climate change and water resources. And they would like to make this presentation, and I said this would be perfect. So we're really happy to hear these stories from, how do you say that, Tohoku? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jose and Debbie to tell us more about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's so nice to see you one more time.
Yeah.
Yes, Jose was here in 2009.
Yeah, 2009.
Yes, and so we were happy he's back too.
And especially thank you for the opportunity to talk about the research that we did in preparation for making this performance work. I once had a playwright tell me that a work of art or a performance is like an iceberg, where what you see on stage is this very tiny, tiny piece of the ice, and underwater is this huge mass of thinking and feeling and talking with people and research and a lot of development that goes into it. And so for me, it's really great to have this opportunity to talk about some of the research that we did when we, as we were making this work. So there are two sort of ideas that I wanted to bring up that we've been thinking about. One is the concept of eternity, long spans of time. And the other is the idea of being unreasonable, and how unreasonable we need to be in order to change the status quo. So we'll come back to those during the presentation, but those are sort of two framing points that I want to make.
So as Terry says, we were lucky to have the opportunity to go to Japan a year after the disaster. So we went to Japan, to the north of Japan, in the Iwate prefecture. As you can see, the bubble A, it's the Iwate prefecture. As you can see, the kind of, where are we located in terms of, where is Tokyo and also where is Fukushima. So we were in the northeast of Japan, and we were working with this organization called Tono Magokoro. And this is an organization that coordinates volunteers, mostly from Japan, to do relief work for the tsunami and now the nuclear meltdown.
Mm-hmm. And I should also mention that it's particularly relevant right now. Tomorrow, March 11th, is the 3rd anniversary of the earthquake in Japan. I don't know when this program will be aired, but right now, it's in about 8 hours. It will be the three-year anniversary.
It's so this map is kind of the same map, but it's more zoom in. As you can see, the first the letter A, it's Osuchi, one of the cities that we visit, and then Kamaichi was down below, and then a little bit more down Rikusen, Takata. Those three cities were the ones that we were working.
And so Tono Magokoro is the relief organization. It's actually, you can see it farther inland. They set up this organization after the disaster, and basically what they do every day is send busloads of volunteers out to the coast to a bunch of cities on the coast. It takes about an hour to get there, but because they're far inland, they weren't affected by the tsunami, so that's where they're based. The first place that we went was Rikuzen Takata, and this is the remains of City Hall in that city, and you can see that it's there's an altar there with flowers and offerings of paper cranes and other kinds of offerings, food sometimes. And when we went to each city, the busloads of volunteers are taken to each city, and the first thing that they do is to stop to pay their respects to all the people that perished in the tsunami and earthquake. So this is an example of one of the altars there.
So we found out that those cities, Osuchi, Rikusen, Takata, and Kamaishi, were the most devastating cities that the tsunami hit. We found out that the magnitude it was the greatest. We were looking about. People were talking about kind of measuring the waves of the tsunami. Like it was like 25 feet high, and so we have kind of we were looking, especially some buildings that have that, that dimension. In this photo, you can see, we were working. I think this side is Rinkusen Takata, and it's a fisherman kind of town. So the work that we did, it was trying to clean up the soil. It was a greenhouse, and it was kind of a project sponsored by the German government that they wanted to do greenhouses and also a community center for the fishermen. And they were planning to plant potatoes and onion at that time. So we were kind of scrapping the soil and taking out the big rocks. And so that was kind of the jobs that we were doing there.
Mm-hmm. And so the soil was really poisoned by the seawater coming in. The salinity of the soil was really high, so things wouldn't grow. So they had to, and probably still are, rehabilitating the soil by, for example, putting wood chips in to increase the water content of the soil, or sometimes planting sunflowers, which are plants that can actually take up some of the salt in their roots without dying, just trying to get the soil to be able to produce food again. And actually the year after, a little bit after we came back, the following year, they sent us photos of vegetables that actually grew in this soil, so we were so happy to see that.
This is a new building. This is a fish freezer. A year, when the tsunami hit that place, that freeze was destroyed. Was all the fish, frozen fish, spread out into the river and into the soil. So it was a lot of big contamination in that time. And luckily, one of the big projects was to rebuild that freezer. It was very interesting when we were there and we were talking with the fishermen. There were some flies around, and they were killing the flies, and they were like laughing. But somebody said like, oh, now we are laughing, but a year ago we were laughing. And the joke was that the flies became really fat. They were unable to fly, so they were like, so like that was kind of the joke. So it was very interesting.
But in reality, it was a really big health hazard to have so much just dead fish everywhere with all these flies. And some of the volunteers who volunteered, it wasn't when we were there, but in the summertime, said the stench was just unbearable, and they were trying to clean things up, but it was a very hard task to do. So this is a photograph of a gym, a large gym in Rikuzen Takata. It was actually the evacuation center for the city. So after an earthquake, everyone was supposed to go to this gym to be safe, but unfortunately, because it was so much on flat land, and because the waves of the tsunami were so large, the waves came to the top rafters of the gym, and everyone, except for 1 or 2 people, perished in this evacuation center.
So when we were like kind of in front of that building in that gym, we really saw kind of the dimension of the waves. I mean, it was, as you can see, it's a gym with like risers and seeing cars inside. I mean, it was like, this is so big.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like.
And a lot of the people were saying, oh, why did the government set up this evacuation center in this gym? This is ridiculous. Why didn't they protect us better? And other people were saying, well, we knew where this evacuation center was as citizens, and we didn't say anything. There's some point where we have to, take responsibility for these kinds of things and not expect the government to necessarily take care of us.
One also the other efforts that they were doing when we were there was to really take all the debris of the cars that that the tsunami took to the ocean and try to clean up. And they were creating these parking lots, bringing all the cars that that went in the ocean. In this, this is also a government building. As you can see in the back, on the wall, and in some doors, like these crosses, red crosses. And those red crosses were made by, after the tsunami, like a day after the tsunami, people were going to find survivors. And they found dead bodies there. So one of the systems that they created was like to really, put crosses when they saw a dead body, and then trying to find, people that still were alive.
And that made it efficient for the coroners who had to go in and collect the people who had perished, to be able to quickly recognize where they needed to go. This is the town of Kamaishi. So this used to be a residential neighborhood. Used to have a whole bunch of houses along this little path. And there was a woman that asked for volunteers to come and clean up her plot of land. So that's where her house used to stand. And so our job was to go in with shovels and hose and things and try and dig up all the debris that was buried there. And there were articles of clothing, toys, broken china, rocks, plaster, concrete, just a bunch of things that we would dig out of the land. And sometimes we would find huge beams that we didn't realize were huge beams until we uncovered it and realized that we couldn't move it ourselves. But then we sorted the debris into piles, and later the trucks would come in to take the debris away.
Also, we were, some of the projects that we were working was to kind of beautify the entrances of the town. So like the big, like entrances of Otsuchi or Rikuzen Takata. It was like to really like bring some new energy into the town. So we were really working to beautify kind of the place, like bringing plants and management, maintaining the gardens. So that was one of the big jobs.
Mm-hmm. We were lucky when we went to volunteer. It was actually the weekend of the Kozuchi Shrine Festival. It's an annual festival, and we were there in 2012. The tsunami happened in 2011, and the first time they actually went ahead and had their festival in 2011 in October, only 7 months after the tsunami had taken the town, really. The shrine was actually spared because it happened to be on the top of a hill, so this building was not damaged by the tsunami. And I feel that the reason that they actually asked us to come and volunteer at the festival, but I think that it was clearly just a way to thank the volunteers, to thank us for coming all the way over and working to help rebuild the town. Because they told the two of us, your job is to stand in front of the people when the ritual dances happen, just to make sure that the people don't rush forward and into the ritual dances. Well, of course, nobody did anything of the kind. No one was pushing forward to get into the ritual dances. So basically they said, sit in the front row and you can watch the ritual dances, which they often did things like that and organized other events for the volunteers because they didn't want to feel like they were just taking as victims. They really wanted to give back as well.
So each kind of block or neighborhood in Otsuchi, they have a float. So they used to, make their costumes, make their bring their drumming and pay honor to the shrine, to the gods. So that was like, it was a lot of floats coming into the temple, and then dancing and playing music.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the dances. That's the dragon dance, and then the tiger dance, and the deer dance. So after the first day in the festival, the following day, people were bringing these floating shrines, and playing drums. And if you wanted to your house be blessed, you need to have a little donation. Go to the shrine, go to the temple, and sign up and say, like, I want a blessing to my house. So the blessing consisted in bringing a float of dancers and musicians to dance in your yard, and in return also they will give food or beer or more money. And luckily I was one of the of the floats. So it was very interesting because I didn't speak Japanese, but they asked me to play little symbols, and I was following them into the town to bless the houses through dancing and playing music.
Yeah, so this is City Hall in the city of Otsuchi, and you can see that the waves came quite high, the second floor. And the time on the clock is about the time when the tsunami hit this building. So after we volunteered for about a week in this area, we traveled south to visit some friends of ours who live just outside the exclusion zone in Fukushima. They live in a city called Minami-Soma, and their home is actually inside the exclusion zone, so they had to evacuate. But they didn't evacuate very far. They evacuated just outside the borders of the exclusion zone. And I had met them the year before, or the summer before we went, and wrote to them and said, we're going to come. I was wondering if we could interview you when we're there because, you lost your house, and this is a very sad story. And they said, well, you can come and visit us. If you're not afraid of the radiation, please come and stay at our house. And I said, well, I'm really afraid of the radiation. And, what do you do? How do you live? How do you make sure that the food you eat and the water you drink is safe? And Mr. and Mrs. Tamagawa, Ichiro and Harumi Tamagawa, and his mother live in this house that's right outside the exclusion zone. And he just retired from being a high school principal. And so his job after the disaster was to explain to the high school students what had happened and about radiation and what to do. So he had a really stressful job, but he explained to me the same thing, that it's kind of all probability. You can limit your exposure by staying indoors, by limiting the amount of time that you spend close to the source of radiation, and how they monitor that. So in Fukushima, they have set up monitoring stations, and you also have personal Geiger counters that people carry around with them. So they picked us up from the Fukushima train station because all the railway lines had been damaged or washed away on the routes to the coast. So they picked us up in their car and gave us a little Geiger counter. And as we were going over the mountains from Fukushima City to the coast, you have to pass through this mountain pass through Itate Mura, which is Itate village, which is now a ghost town. But it's higher in elevation and it's very wooded. There are a lot of trees. And as we passed over that higher elevation area, the Geiger counter started to go up more, because when the hydrogen explosions happened, the fallout, the radioactive contamination would just settle on the ground or whatever it hit first, and so the higher elevations tended to be higher radioactivity. And in addition, the trees, all the surface of the leaves of the trees tended to catch the radioactive fallout as well. So we went over, and then when we started descending in elevation, then the numbers would go back down again.
Yeah, there were some places that we felt that, the counters were really high, and, we drove, right away, going, and then, they were, each side, it had a different kind of radiation.
Mm-hmm. So this is an example of one of the monitoring stations that they have set up around the city. So not only do you have a personal Geiger counter, but you have a monitoring station set up around the area. And they take measurements at 1 meter above the ground and at 500 centimeters above the ground. And the reason for the 500 centimeter reading is for children, because they're closer to the ground and they're also more susceptible to radiation. And they publish these readings every day in the newspaper, and they publish it on the internet. They have a site in English that you can look at. That it's on television, on the morning news every day. It sounds like sort of a horror film or something, but it's reality of what they're living.
That is the house of the Tamagawa family, which is inside the exclusion zone. So I think at that time, they recently opened the exclusion zone because they thought that it didn't work, the radiation, how they call
The concentric circles that they used as for rules for evacuation purposes were actually not accurate, which the government did know this. They could tell that if a radiation leak happened, it wouldn't necessarily travel in perfect concentric circles. Mm-hmm. It had a particular pattern based on winds and many other things. But they decided, for some reason, to evacuate based on concentric circles. This is inside the zone, and we went inside the zone by car. They allowed people to go in and come out the same day. So you couldn't stay overnight at your house if it was inside the exclusion zone, but you could go in. And what you'll notice is that this was a year and a half after the earthquake happened, and things look exactly the same as the day after the earthquake happened, because no one could go in and spend any time in the zone to clean up these big messes.
So when we were there, it started kind of, the cleanup at that particular zone, but it was very slow, the process.
This is the home of my friend's parents, That's a shrine for, most houses have a shrine like that, in a butsudan in their house. And it was actually washed out into the front yard, and I think some firefighters actually picked it up and put it back inside. But yeah, their house is completely destroyed. This, I believe we're in Itatemoda right here, where the counts, the level of radiation was pretty high. I don't know if you can see in the background, there's those gray mounds behind the trees. So they're doing some kind of, they're scraping the dirt. They're scraping the top sort of bit of dirt off of a really wide area in order to start to decontaminate things. So if you scrape the radioactive substances away, you have to put them somewhere. So they put them in piles and covered them with tarps, and that for now is the extent of what they're able to do. They can't burn it, the debris. They can't ship it to another prefecture, so they put it in piles and cover it, and that's where it is right now temporarily. It also happens if they're reconstructing roads or building new roads, because one of the problems during the evacuation was that the roads were jammed with traffic. So they realized they needed to build more highways, which they're doing now, but they're ripping down old bridges and old construction. But that material is also radioactive, so they need to do the same thing, keep it in piles.
And the controversy is like nobody wants.
Nobody wants
Nobody
it.
wants.
Wants
And then
the,
so like get
the waste, sure.
Right.
Yeah. So after the Fukushima trip, we decided to go to Hiroshima and try to kind of have some kind of connection of what the crisis of Fukushima, as well as what happened in the past. So we took the train and went to Hiroshima, and this is the Peace Plaza in Hiroshima.
Yeah, this is a memorial to the atomic bomb dome. So the epicenter of the blast was above this dome, and they've just maintained this building as a memorial to remember the bomb. And it was interesting to sort of make comparisons between an atomic bomb and a nuclear meltdown in a power plant. I mean, I think of an atomic bomb blast as there could be nothing possibly worse than that. But the amount of radioactive material actually in an atomic bomb, or the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki, is minuscule compared to the amount of radioactive material in spent fuel rods in a nuclear power plant. So we think of it as the peaceful use of nuclear energy. But in reality, I'm coming back to this idea of eternity, that we are leaving behind this legacy of hot, contamination for hundreds of thousands of years in some cases, and in large quantities. And particularly coming to Pennsylvania too, I know that people have a consciousness of 3 Mile Island when that happened in the late 70s, and I know that the construction of nuclear power plants declined a little bit then, but it's still quite prevalent. That's just a map of
the epicenter of the Hiroshima
nuclear bomb. And right now, unfortunately, in Japan, I feel like there's been quite a swing to the right, and there's a pundit who is from Japan who wrote a column in the New York Times not that long ago, who was likening it to applying Naomi Klein's shock doctrine theory. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but this idea that when a huge disaster, like Hurricane Katrina is one example that she gives, when a huge disaster hits a population, they're reeling from it, and then corporations and governments can easily come in and impose drastic measures on this population that's still reeling and take things in a way that they want things to go. So for example, in Naomi Klein cites like charter schools being set up everywhere in New Orleans as opposed to public education, which happened right after Katrina happened. And the Japanese government is right now under the Abe administration, and very pro-nuclear, going to continue using nuclear power, which does make up the majority of Japan's energy source. But he's also doing things like passing state secrets law, which basically means that the government can keep secret any information that they feel is a threat to national security without much more definition than that. And if you're a reporter and you make a report about something that's considered a state secret, you can go to jail for 10 years. He's also reinterpreting Japan's pacifist constitution right now, which after World War II, Japan set up this pacifist constitution saying they could only have self-defense forces to defend themselves, but they could not go to war, they could not wage war, because they just finished a war and they didn't really have a good time in that war, right? And Abe is now trying to reinterpret that to say, well, but if the United States asks us for support, then we can go to war. Then we can, there are all these exceptions. So it's very frightening to me, and but there are.
Yeah, so we were kind of, yeah. After Hiroshima, we went back to Tokyo, and we were looking for those little resistant groups or these kind of unreasonable kind of, movements that kind of really makes us to really, see things in a different way. And we found out that every Friday at the entrance of the Prime Minister's house are these demonstrations. And they are well attended. There is so many people there. And we were kind of really happy that, it was, still, there were movements, little movements that it tell us, something that we don't know. And that was something that, the whole idea of being unreasonable, Japan hasn't kind of, they don't have, for the last 20 years, they haven't been kind of being, demonstrators or something. And this time and seeing those people being demonstrated in the streets, it became this kind of, sense of the question of reasonable, being unreasonable, we need to say something, we need to do something. This is affecting us very deeply. So, yeah.
So that's, I could say more about, our work and the art that we're making, and also the impact on water. I know some folks are very interested in the impact on the oceans of this nuclear leaking and contamination. But I kind of want to also open it up for questions and have, if anyone is interested, has a question or a comment, I would love to hear.
What do you think are some of the better strategies that we could be using to clean up all of this nuclear radiation?
Right. Unfortunately, I'm not a scientist, so I'm sort of approaching it from a different angle. But one of the professors at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, I think it's in Kyoto, Ikuro Anzai, he is proposing, he's not proposing ways, maybe he's proposing ways to clean it up, but he's also proposing that this zone of contaminated area be turned into a research zone. Like, if it's contaminated, there are areas that are contaminated that are not going to be habitable. And we may as well plant some plants there and see what happens when you plant plants there. Or, continue to do the research to find out what impact this is all having. I don't have the answer for how the best to clean it up. I'm hoping that other people will have some idea.
I definitely had a question about how doing the volunteer work and meeting people in Japan has influenced your artistic process and how it's, how you're using it in the piece that you're presenting now.
Oh, this work is full evening work. It's like an hour and 15 minutes. So what are you going to see? It's going to be like an excerpt for 20 minutes. So we were very struck by like seeing the big wave. Like it was really looking at how high the wave was. And one of the sections of the piece was to really explore that in the architecture of this in the architecture of the space that we were working. So we were climbing the wall and we were doing some kind of, no acrobatics, but some kind of suspension things. So that kind of informed that section by knowing that in Japan. The sweater, the section that you are going to able to see, it really brought. I was inspired, and maybe Debbie has another version, but I was inspired of seeing this woman in kind of a documentary that she was looking for her family day after, and she was very like desolated and looking like she recognized the place as like this is the house of my sister. And
even though there was nothing, there was just a bunch of rubble everywhere, but she found the location.
And that kind of image kind of really informed us this section of that we developed.
Right.
Through there.
It's called Found and Lost, the section that you'll see. I also think we started working a lot with this idea of instability. So we were working with this amazing artist, Kevin O'Connor, who has trained a lot in circus arts. And I haven't, but he said, stand on my shoulders. And I'm going to run around and tilt and make you feel very, very afraid. And he can also amazingly climb the walls and just do incredible things. But this idea of instability and unpredictability, something that we definitely worked with. And also sort of just the physical body, we thought a lot, you'll see a little bit if you come to the show, we thought a lot about how we read the effects on the physical body of radiation or any other violence against the body.
Another thing that also we were very interested in was in the concept of love. Kind of, we have this sculpture, like this costume that we felt some kind of the concept of love that Debbie brought it into the process, into the creative process, that I felt really connected. And can you explain a little bit what was about? It was a Plato. It was a philosopher Plato that they say that we came together. We came in.
Oh yeah. So it's an Aristophanes myth about the origins of love. That originally human beings had 4 arms and 4 legs and 2 heads, and because of hubris, Zeus split them in 2. And that's why we look like we do now. But when you find your other half, that's the origin of love. And that was sort of when the earthquake happened, we had been already working on this piece. It was the very beginning stages. And then it suddenly really became, for me, more not about romantic love, but love in the bigger sense. And just that connection that is lost. I think when the earthquake in Haiti happened, I had the same feeling of, if someone loses someone, they could be anywhere under that huge amount of rubble. They could be right there for all I know, and you cannot find them. And that sense of loss was very, very important to us.
Yeah, in general, their work that I've noticed is not didactic. So it's, you know, it's not about, although they're very sympathetic to like, yes, let's organize, let's, you know, we need that unreasonable protest, you know, we need people to, as particularly as more conservative policies and corporations and so forth get their way. But I think that's what's so beautiful about their work is that they see how it registers on the body, on the human feelings, and from there they build out that message to the audience that moves them to participate and to understand the crisis, you know. I mean, the gargantuan, you know, the size, like you say, you know, like that building with, you know, the wave was up to the second floor. I mean, just the physical scale of human beings and their feelings and emotions in view of that huge, you know, disaster is something that's almost untranslatable, but you can get a feel of it. So
One of the memorable things that happened in Otsuchi was that I felt really connected, especially when we were going to bless the houses, to use dancing and music to just bring some kind of a different kind of energy into the place. And I feel really connected because I felt some kind of that I have a function as an artist, that we have something more than, you know, bring you this topic that is extremely sometimes unthinkable. I mean, it's so huge that I don't know if the human mind can really, really grasp deeply. But I just like, we came to this resolution, like, you know, that's what we are. We are artists, we have our body, we have our music, and that's what we do. And I feel that, you know, besides this kind of darkening ages, like we have something to offer, even though the little movement that probably creates some kind of healing or some kind of joy at that particular time that we don't see.
Right. How does the arts make that healing and that resiliency? You know, they're lucky that they have that ancient tradition that helps them with that kind of resiliency. And then from there, whereas that springboard it to the strength to take action. Yeah. It's great. Well, any other final comments?
I just
or-
wanted to make one final comment, maybe.
Yeah.
So the concert here is actually all going to be in the theater, but this piece was actually premiered outside in a site-specific way. So we did a lot of the performance in the streets, sometimes temporarily blocking intersections, which sounds so radical, but I feel like when we spent so much time in the streets, we really built a strong connection with people in the neighborhood. It's sort of surprising to me. I didn't know what to expect, but it was really extremely satisfying. I love doing it in the theater also, but I also love people would come in and be very connected and moved, or sometimes play with us, or sometimes they would even like shout that they were bored or to us, but they would stay. But I felt so. I felt like they were really being honest. Like in the theater, you can't stand up and say, "That's really boring, I'm leaving," or you can, I guess. But but I loved that honesty, right? I loved just that they could do that, or they would be talking to each other. Oh my God, what are they doing now? So it would be great if any of you do come to the show. I'd love to hear your feedback, especially because you have seen sort of the iceberg underneath the water, and most of the people probably, I don't know if they'll have seen this presentation. So, but thank you.
Well, thanks again for sharing all of that with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.